welcome back to the Faith, Fish, and Feathers podcast. I'm Caleb.
And this is James, and today's episode is about food plots. Now, today we have our favorite guest, Clifton Randall of Randall's Old Mill Pet and Farm Center in Edmore, Michigan. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Cliff.
Am I the favorite just because I'm the first?
I mean, maybe.
No further answers.
Hi, I'm Cliff Randall. I'm owner of Randall's Old Mill in Edmore, the big town of Edmore. I own a feed store there. It has feed and light hardware, pet and farm supplies, and we also do quite a bit of seed and different things for food plots, feed, fertilizer.
Alright, so we're going to have you tell us your favorite hunting story, and then we're going to jump right into the questions.
Favorite hunting story? Probably my favorite hunting story would probably not be my most successful hunting story.
Well, it's probably the best ones.
My favorite hunting stories are probably when I was a kid, before I could even take out a gun or a weapon to hunt. But I'd go out with my grandfather and my uncle and my cousin. I remember those probably more than I do. I mean, I've gone on some Montana backpack hunts, and I've gotten elk and mule deer out west. But those times hunting with Grandpa are probably the most memorable to me. I can remember one time we went out. It was an opening morning. Of course, opening morning in Michigan is like Christmas morning.
It's holiday, man.
Yeah, it is. So
most jobs give you a couple days off for opening day.
No schools happen on.
Yeah, my school didn't do that, but I got the day off. I remember that because that was a big deal. I got to spend the night at Grandma and Grandpa's, and we got up early, and Grandma made us a big breakfast, and we went out. I remember it was frosty, freezing cold, and we went out there, and of course that was before we had a lot of blinds and stuff too. So I went out and decided I was going to walk with Grandpa that day. So we walked out, found a nice log in the woods, and sat down there and sat there just shivering away. And then all of a sudden I heard something like rustling in the leaves, and I mean it was a different sound than what the squirrels usually make. But I was pretty young and didn't know the difference, so I was sitting there, and then all of a sudden I saw come up over the ridge a buck. Grandpa didn't hear real well, so he didn't even hear him coming, so I was like, Grandpa, there's a buck coming. He's like, all right, sit still. So he gets the old 12 gauge ready. And then I think somebody came up behind the deer or something, because it just all of a sudden took off running right towards us. And Grandpa pulled up and fired a couple times. That deer never slowed down, just kept right on running. I think we took out a couple saplings or something, but never did hit the deer. But I think that's probably my most memorable story, is just going out there with Grandpa and walking around the woods and freezing to death.
I feel like that was a different type of hunting back then.
Oh yeah,
now.
it was.
The mindset of hunting has definitely changed since then. Like, people don't do things the same way they used to.
Yeah.
But so main subject of the day today is going to be food plots. So I guess we can kind of just open up. Tell us the different kinds of food plots.
Yeah. What all can you plant? What would you recommend planting in general? Like, what is there to choose from?
So food plots can be whatever you want it to be. They can be very customizable, and I think that's what people get. You know, the ultimate goal is to grow something that's going to bring in the deer so that you can hunt over. But people get, I think, more into just growing the food plots than actually like trying to draw on the deer. But I mean, you can do anything. So I mean, you can just grow some vegetables out there and let them come eat it. You can grow grass. I mean, grass makes a good food plot. If you're hunting somewhere where it's, it turns all brown and dead leaves in the fall, and you got some green grass next to a woods, that's going to draw a deer into it. So I mean, food plots can be whatever you want it to be. I mean, there is some more typical stuff like the brassicas and oats, and I mean even the corn and soybeans and that type of stuff.
Like the sorghums, the oats, the alfalfa, grains, clovers, stuff like that. That's good for turkeys.
Yep. I mean, it's very customizable, and I mean you can customize the shape of your food plot, the size of your food plot, what you put in your food plot, how you plant the food plot. I mean, you can do it all by hand with a rake and a shovel. I mean, you can get big ag equipment, so it's very customizable.
So what direction? So let's say, let's look at Michigan as a whole. For the most part in Michigan, you're having anywhere from 10 to 80-acre parcels of land. A lot of it's broken up into squares, right? So not everybody, probably most people are not hunting a 100-acre piece of ground. Most people are probably hunting 40 or less. So let's say a 40, 60, or 20-acre piece of ground. What what should a guy look to have for a food plot in the ground in something like that? Let's say he doesn't have a lot of natural browse around him. Let's say he doesn't have, maybe he has acorns early in the fall. He doesn't have apples. He doesn't have, anything other than that, other than those acorns that early, 2 weeks of season that might hold deer in that acorn flat that he has. But after that, what should he be doing to draw deer or maybe even hold deer on his ground?
Well, I look to see what's not there. What can you offer that's not already there? So if you have a lot of bedding and cover in your area, then I would grow something that would have more food source to it. If there's a lot of, corn, soybeans, if you're hunting an ag area where there's already a lot of food, then maybe grow something that's more bedding related, more cover. Try to offer them something that they're not getting elsewhere that'll draw them onto your piece of property. So, if food plots can be as small as an acre or smaller. And, if you put out an acre of soybeans and corn and there's, 120 acres next door, you're not really offering them anything that they can't already get. So I would go, more towards bedding at that point or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So you got to look at what's around you. More than just what you have, what will draw them to your property.
Gotcha. Okay. So, all right, now obviously a lot of this is personal preference, but what is your preferred food plot? What are you feeding deer in your area?
Well, probably the most common, popular one is the brassicas, like your
the tillage radish.
Yeah, your radishes, your rape, your turnips, that type of thing. Something that in late fall, after it freezes, brings out the sugars in it and has a nice, good palatability through the fall. Those are quite popular. They're probably the most popular.
Okay.
And the other things, like I said, is what's different than what everybody else has. What else can you bring in? So oats are pretty popular because that does a nice green plot. Like I said, if everything around you is brown, the corn, soybeans being harvested, you got a lot of brown leaves and stuff on the ground, and you plant something that's going to turn green, that's going to draw them in too.
Yep. So I think I'm not the most knowledgeable in food plots, but a lot of the time in the ground that we do have, we'll put a small plot in, and it's not very big, and it's probably 40 yards wide at the most. And
speaking on that, if you look at the science, most hunters only use 3 to 5% of their property as food plot hunting.
Yeah, so
it doesn't have to be huge.
No, and I think for our ground, it's a 40-yard wide circle basically of ground that we have that we can. It's small. It's all hardwood, and it's highly shaded. So let's say in a small, like a 10-acre, 5-acre piece of ground, and let's say he's got a lot of timber in it, and not every landowner is interested in cutting down a bunch of his timber. So what do you recommend to put in a highly shaded area? It's not getting much sun.
The first thing with any food plot that you're going to put in is do some type of soil sample.
Okay.
Figure out what you got to work with, and then decide how you want to amend it. So if you cleared an area in the woods, chances are it's quite acidic. So you're going to have to put quite a bit of lime down for a while to get that to where you can grow, most food plots. There is some things like buckwheat and rye and stuff that'll grow in more acidic soil.
Something more hardier than your average.
Always get something growing in there. Even while you're working on amending the soil. But so look to see what you can grow there, and then decide what you want. The other thing when you're picking your plot too, size of your plot and shape of your plot is quite important too. So if you have a small plot that you got, growing something like the corn and soybeans that gets consumed quite fast isn't probably the best pick there. Maybe grow something that regenerates faster, like a clover or grass or rye or something that will keep coming back faster than what the corn and soybeans will. And as far as shape, you can grow a plot on any shape, but to hunt different shapes is better. If you have something where they'll feel more protected, if you can have like a kidney bean shaped plot where the buck can't just walk out there to the edge of it, look out there and see, there's no does out there, or skirt around, make him go out there and decide. or plant a border. If you're up against the road or something and you're planting a plot, maybe plant something that grows really tall along there. Plant some corn, some sorghum or something that grows. Get a screen so that they feel comfortable and will come out into your plot.
Gotcha. Do you have anything recommended that you would like to plant for screens?
Yeah, so it's usually a mixture of both the grain sorghum and Sudan grass sorghum. Both of those get quite tall. They can get 6 feet tall.
Okay.
Just regular corn grows tall, and mixes. Mix it together. Don't in most all the plot mixes and stuff. You don't want to just stick with one particular type of seed. A variety of stuff will definitely, for one, it makes the soil, amends the soil better, having a variety of stuff in the soil. But even like in that screen, they'll work off each other. The stalk stuff will give the Sudan grass some support, so they'll get taller and thicker.
Gotcha. And that kind of, like the Sudan grass and stuff that you're talking about too, I mean, it's not just benefiting just your deer, it's also benefiting your game birds.
Yeah, so in the grain sorghum and the corn, I obviously eat that. And then the game birds will use that as bedding cover and stuff. I mean, turkeys love to burrow into that stuff and have their nests.
Yep.
Now, talking food plots, would you like to change them every year, or do you tend to keep them the same every year? What's the benefit to changing them versus keeping it the same?
That's the preference again. So if you have the ability where you want to go out there and grow something different every year, I think that's probably better. But a clover plot that's perennial, and then you just have to go out there and mow it each year. If you don't have the time or the resources to replant every year, that does great. You can frost seed over it and just keep it lush if it starts to get thin out on you. So, I mean, it just depends on how much you want to do and what you want to do.
So I think, in my experience too, I think clover a lot. Once frost hits and it starts getting kind of woody, I mean, deer kind of veer away from feeding off of that too. I think that's important too.
And again, doing a variety of them. Certain clovers do better, late, and some do earlier. So if you have a good mixture in there, hopefully you'll have something that'll stay green, right up until it gets covered with snow.
Yeah. So building up soil. I think every guy who's going to do food plots or any kind of growing, if he has he's done his soil sampling, he's coming into it, maybe it's more on the sandy side than what it should be or whatever. So, but he's planting something that year. What is something that we can plant as hunters and stuff, stewards of our ground, to build up our soil even when we're planting it?
Yeah, so there's different plants that bring out different nutrients in the ground. So if you're having a real weedy problem, things like buckwheat are a good natural herbicide, so it'll help get you to crowd out those weeds and stuff. If you're trying to build up nitrogen, things like crimson clover will bring it in. Cereal rye is another great one that puts a lot of potash and stuff back in your soil. And just doing a variety of seed blends in there, so that each plant will bring out different nutrients in the soil. And the thing is to try to keep something growing in there all year long. Put one crop right in after the other, if you can. Frost seed in the fall or in the spring, and then go right into a summer blend, and then put a fall blend in there, and just keep rotating it right in one after another. When it sets barren is when you start to lose nutrients. It naturally just depletes when it's set barren. Ground does. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Now let's talk till, no till.
Oh.
What is your preferred?
No till by far. Yeah. If you can keep from disturbing all of the microbes and the earthworms and everything in there that's creating a good soil base for you, every time you disc, you're killing all that stuff. So if you can keep from tilling it and doing that, the problem is no-till equipment is expensive. So I mean, most people don't have the means to go out and buy a no-till drill. You can rent them from some soil conservation districts and stuff like that. If you're doing a big enough plot, it might be worth renting one. But there's other ways to get seed in the ground. Like right now with the freezing and thawing of the ground, you can frost seed in a lot of seed right now without having to till it. So timing is another thing where you can use to get it in the ground. But yeah, if you can avoid tilling, especially in a food plot, I would definitely go that route.
Now, what would make you till? Like, what in your mind would be like, I know I'm sticking to the no-till, but I'm going to till this?
One, if it gets so rutted up or something that
that you can't,
go across it anymore, it's just maybe people have been driving on it. It's gotten compacted. It's gotten rough. Maybe that would till. If you don't want to spray a herbicide to control weeds, sometimes you have to till it to control weeds. And then the other thing is just seed to soil contact. If you don't have, there's so much dead stuff, if it's been, neglected for years, and there's just so much material on top of the ground that you can't get the seed to the soil.
Right, if you're planting stuff and it's just not taken because it can't get into where it's supposed to.
If you can't get the seed to the ground, you're gonna have to go in there and chew that up or burn it off or something to get it so that you can get the seed to soil contact.
Gotcha. Let's talk burning even. So a lot of guys do burns. They'll burn the ground or whatever. Now, let's say certain kinds of food plot. I know a lot of plants do benefit from burned soil, from burning. So does that benefit a food plot if you have the resources or want to burn?
Yep. Yeah. If you go through and burn, especially if it's a field or a wooded area that's just been cleared, you go through there and burn that. You get a lot of that material off, but you're also releasing a lot of stuff back into the soil. A lot of your native stuff, grasses and stuff, will start growing that, there's been seed that's been laying there dormant that's just been covered up. So that stuff will start to grow. But yeah, you need to know what you're doing if you're gonna burn.
Yeah, you can contact any of your local fire departments, and they'll be happy to schedule something with you and go out there, and they'll just have a couple trucks on standby and burn it for you. You just got to get a hold of them. So let's talk end plots towards fall, end of the year, right before it snows. What do you switch up? Do you put something in a little hardier so that way when it pops up they're digging in the snow for it? Or
so if it's late, if you're past that, so the last window to plant like fall plot is about 30 days before the first killing frost. So if we're past that, then we're into like the cereal rye, wheat, that type of thing, grasses. I like to get some cereal rye in late because for one, that helps with the soil amendment. In the spring, you can till that back down if you are doing tillage, or burn it down with the herbicide if you're doing no-till, and that will definitely put some nutrients back in the ground.
You mentioned you just touched on a little bit of time frame, like late or too soon. So let's go earliest that you're planting a certain type of food plot. We'll start at the earliest and then work your way to fall. Work your way to the last that you would plant if you're planting it.
So the earliest would be when there's still snow on the ground. Going out there to frost seed. If you can time it right where you still got a little snow on the ground, go out there and frost seed your clovers, alfalfas, frost seed well too. You could see it right on the snow, so you can see how you're covering. So it works real well, and as soon as that snow melts, it's going to suck it right into the ground with that freezing and thawing action of just the natural weather. So that would be the earliest, and then you're going to go into your spring plots where you're going to just do your normal either no-till or tillage, whether you're planting oats or buckwheat. You can do clovers early spring too. That kind of goes into your fall plots, which you're going to try to plant usually sometime in August. Try to get them in, like I said, before at least 30 days before the first frost, usually from 1st of August all the way till early part of September. You can do all your food plots, and that's where you'd probably want to put in your brassicas and stuff like that. You can do brassicas in the spring too, especially if you're doing like sugar beets or something like that you want to have to get bigger and more growth on it. A lot of times when you plant those in the spring, though, the deer just demolish them all summer, and by fall you're replanting anyway. So.
Okay, so so let's go to. Let's say I've got my soil. I've worked on what I have. Let's say whether I have field or woods. Let's say I have woods, and let's say James has fields. My soil is prime, but again, woods obviously you're not getting a ton of sunshine, and then field you are. So obviously it opens up a lot more. What am I planting in my woods plot versus my field plot?
In your woods plot, probably the things that work the best again would be a grass. Like you can plant perennial ryegrass. Some clovers will do pretty decent with a lot of shade. Beyond that, you're just kind of risking it if you put much in there. If the soil is great, maybe if you get just a few hours of sunlight in there, if you can get some morning sun on it or something like that, you could probably grow a few brassicas. And rape usually grows pretty good in low light. So
okay, so I have 40 acres of hunting ground. how much of that should I devote to what I should put onto a food plot? What should I look at to say I need to put food in? Let's say I don't live in a big ag area, so I have 40 acres of ground.
40 acres, so then that's when I'd go back to look to see what the neighbors have. If there's no bedding around, I would probably split that up and do some food and do some bedding. Try to do some screens that would draw them, in daylight hours out of the bedding into the food.
So you really want as much diversity as you can. If you've got the resources and the acreage, you really want to do anything you can, give them everything that they want.
Yeah, I mean, if your neighbor's got a lot of bedding area or something like that, then I would probably do more food, try to draw them out, into your food. Again, make them feel comfortable coming out there doing some screens or something.
Yeah, I think for, at least in Michigan, I can only speak for my area and the small tracts of land that get hunted around here, but it's almost impossible to keep a mature buck on 40 acres a lot of the time. It really is. So I think in my mindset as a hunter, I'm thinking I need to keep the does here, and then in return that's going to keep him on my place for as long as I can keep him here.
Yeah.
Because I can't make him. A lot of the time his core range is bigger than 40 acres. It is. So I might have it where he's bedding on my 40. Or maybe he's just coming in to check out the does. But if I have that food, the food plot, or whatever, that water, whatever is keeping does there, right, then I can maximize how much time he'll spend on my small piece of ground.
Yep. Yeah, him or the buck on the neighbor's
Yeah.
property. If he's, again, they're going to travel. So if he's out traveling and he comes onto your property and there's something he likes there, either the does are there, the bedding's right, the food's right, he might stay there. So it might be a different buck that you didn't even know was there, that you might be drawing across, and you want to keep him on your property. So yeah, you maybe not keep your buck on there, but any buck that passes through, you want to try to keep them there as long as you can.
Right. Yeah, so let's talk budget. Let's talk budget food plot. So
yeah,
I don't know a lot of people that are rich, so
yeah. So that's what the thing with food plot. Like I said, you can do it with a rake or all the way up to big ag equipment. So it just depends on what your budget is. I mean, I know a lot of people that come in here that do a lot with their lawnmower. So you can get frost seed in some clovers and go out there and mow it down, a few times a year with your lawnmower just to keep it fit. So just depends on what I mean, it's very customizable.
Now with food plots, do I get what I pay for? Can I get high quality seed or high quality stuff in the ground for cheaper?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of big name brand stuff out there, and it does grow well, but there's also, we sell a lot of just bulk seed, that's quite a bit cheaper, and you can create your own blend and stuff like that. That does, I think, just as well. So
what would be the advantage to buying something like Imperial? Like, it's got a big old buck on the bag, right? I read it, it says it's got, this brassica and some tillage radish and rape or whatever's in that bag, right? What would be, versus buying that versus buying just the bulk from something like what you have, and me mixing up something that looks identical on paper to what that Imperial is?
Yeah, the thing I like about theirs is they use some unique brand or varieties of seeds. I mean, so they might have a different kind of rape and a different kind of turnip than what we have. So I mean, and they usually do a pretty good mix of those too. So I mean, it's just the variety of seed, I guess, that would be the difference. They'll have a few things different than what we have. So I mean, we probably have we have a couple different types of turnips, but one type of rape, not the variety in the bulk that you would get in that bag.
Gotcha.
So I imagine there'd be, if you bought a brassica mix, like a name brand one, you're going to get 3 or 4 different types of each seed.
Okay. So with food plots and stuff, I mean, we pair that with, I think, if we're putting all this food and stuff into our deer herd, right? So next thing is probably herd management along with our food plot. We're using that food plot to manage our herd. I would say that they go hand in hand.
Yeah, so that's another thing. What are you doing with your food plot? Are you trying to grow enough there to feed your whole herd? Or are you just trying to use it as a kill plot, just something to hunt over? So I mean, that's another thing to look at. If you're trying to grow enough on there to feed a herd, that's when you really gotta buckle down and put the right nutrients, the right fertilizer, having the right stuff in there that's going to produce the most tonnage, to feed all those deer, that maintain them there. Most people are just growing it as more of a hunting plot, something to hunt over, draw them in, hunt over, maybe get a little bit of nutrition off of it, but not sustain them. But some people do.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, and again, strictly speaking for here, I think a lot of people are just planning a food plot because they want to kill a deer out of it and
Yep.
fill the tag that they have, or 2 tags or whatever it is that they're trying to fill,
Yep.
and then they're done.
Yeah, and it's fun too. A lot of people up here don't live necessarily right up here. This is their hunting ground, so they come up in the summer and go out there and plant food plots. I think they're just something to do,
Yeah.
and see what comes into it. So, it's kind of the cross. I kind of like it because I like to farm and I like to hunt, so it's kind of the crossroads of the two.
Yeah. So, going into, we've got our food plot planted, it's time to hunt, right? So we go into our spot. The deer that are using this regularly, they're frequenting it. Let's say there's a buck frequenting it a lot that I've got my eye on. I'm putting pressure into that food plot, right? So obviously, no matter where you hunt, hunting pressure is going to go up. If you're hunting, they're gonna feel that pressure. How often am I hunting a plot to keep that pressure at a minimum? Obviously, I'm hunting the wind. I mean, if you know how to hunt deer, you're hunting the wind.
Yeah.
So
the other thing you could do with a food plot, like I said, with those screens and stuff too, is plan your entrance and exit. If you can sneak in there without them knowing, scaring them off your plot every time, I think you can hunt it more often. If you're blowing them out of there every time you go in and every time you go out, then yeah, it's probably not hunted as often.
So a lot of scouting goes into where you're placing your plot, and not only just because of the the soil, and you got to take your soil sample and find out how good it is, and the shade and what's around, but I mean just getting in and out of there, the accessibility is a whole other.
Yep. Scout them, see how they're coming in, see how you can get in, your entrance and your exit. It's a key part of the food plot, hunting a food plot.
yeah. So what about adding water to a plot?
Yeah, that's been quite popular in the last few years with the baiting ban still on. They don't consider water a bait, so you can put out a trough, bury a trough and fill it with water, draw them in, especially on dry years when it's real dry in the fall and even in the summer. It'll draw a lot of deer into it. So little ponds, if you have the means to dig a little pond, that definitely will be a long-term draw.
So water source, do I put it in? Am I putting it in the food plot? Am I putting that trough in the middle of my plot? Am I putting that, or am I targeting where the deer are traveling to and from the plot?
Right, the entrance, exit, you setting it right on the side, right in the middle, random place.
They'll go to wherever it is, so I would strategically place it to where you can hunt it. Again, where you can get into it and exit out of it without spooking them off of it, because they're going to come to it. If that's the only water around, they're definitely going to, no matter where you put it, they're going to come get it.
I think a fair amount of thought has to go into when you're hunting a plot, especially if you've had a small kill plot or whatever, because the deer, they're feeding at night a lot of the time. Most deer they're feeding at night, and we want them to come in the daytime. That's when we're hunting them, but they're feeding at night. So a lot of time as a hunter, I'm walking in the morning, I'm going in at night. I'm probably bumping more deer off in the morning in general as I'm going in there than I'm going to see while I'm sitting. And then if I'm getting in there early enough, I'm probably not spooking very many deer coming in the evening as I would maybe as I'm walking out. But again, I can be careful about that and then try to get out before the bulk of the deer show up. So what would you say for a food plot? When should I be hunting it?
Well, hunt it. That's where I would look at the shape of it. So when you're designing your plot, the square rectangle plots or even a circle plot are the worst, because like I said, a buck can walk right up to the edge and look across that whole thing and see what's out there. Same with you walking up to it. If something's out in the middle of that plot, they're going to see you. There's no bends in it, there's no curves. Put something in there for a break. And if it is a square field, break it with that border stuff. Put the tall sorghum, Sudan grass, put it right down the center of it, plant in strips, so that plant a few feet of border, plant
so
a
that's where
strip
the
of green.
customization really does come in, is you could have that screen right there and then have something completely different planted on the other side. You can have clovers, you can have a screen, and then have radishes planted.
Yeah. Because you can have the best nutritious plot out there, but he's going to come eat it in the dark. You know, unless he feels comfortable coming out there during the day.
Right. Yeah. So obviously, 95% of people, when you think food plot, you're thinking deer. But let's talk about when we're planning a food plot. What else can we benefit with not just deer?
Well, turkeys for sure. I mean, again, bedding is a big thing, and predators are probably the biggest problem you have with turkeys. So if you can do a bedding plot where they can hunker down in there, be away from predators, and also if you have a plot out there and you're trying to grow turkeys on it, get rid of some of those predators. I mean, there's way too many skunks and possums and raccoons and
absolutely
coyotes and everything. So I mean,
you could talk a little more about that, couldn't you?
I think in our management, if we're managing our ground, I mean, I think it's amiss to say that I want to plant my food plots and everything that I can go in and I can kill my deer with, but I don't want to do anything else management wise that's going to help me keep deer on my place. Because I think if you have a low or deer or game birds, turkeys, grouse, whatever it may be, predators affect that stuff. They affect the movement of deer. I mean, if you got coyotes going through your property all the time, it might not affect them to where they're staying completely away, but it is going to affect the way that buck's going to move on your property or those does where they're going to stay.
Oh, for sure. Yep.
So to say that I want to plant my food plot to attract deer, but I'm not willing to put in a little extra work to get rid of predators or try to, because probably most guys are just sitting in their in their kitchen, they see a coyote cross the field, they shoot it. Not a lot of guys are going out of their way to try to actually curb a predator problem.
Correct. Yeah. Predators. There's just way too many of them these days that we need to do our part and try to trap them and bring that number back into check, so that we do have our turkeys and fawns. And
I think there was a study done by the Pennsylvania Game Commission, and they did it. They collared a coyote, and they actually studied where she went during fawning season, and she actually had killed, I think, over 30 fawns during a single fawning season. She just went fawn to fawn. And I think that's something important to note. And also it is important to say, too, that adult deer make up very little of a coyote's diet. It does. Fully adult deer, it doesn't make up a very high percentage unless it's carrion or, hunters shot a deer and lost it or whatever. They're not actively, in general, they do, but they're not, most of the time they're not actively going out and hunting adult deer. They're not. But fawns, they're tearing them apart.
Yep, easy prey.
It is. It's opportunistic, and it's easy for them because that fawn's not able to put up a fight. Most fawns are laying, and they're laying on the ground, and then they get found, and then their instinct is don't move. Mm-hmm. So it makes it super easy to catch. Yeah. Whereas adult deer are not the same, on the same level. And Michigan doesn't do. I mean, they do a good job managing bobcat to get more bobcat. We don't do a very good job when there's a problem with bobcats managing it. So I think actually. Studies that have been done is that adult bobcats actually kill more adult deer in general than coyotes do. So.
And how many turkey poults do they?
Oh, and how many adult birds, yeah. Right? So. That's another thing you mentioned, poults. So what can I do in the spring when my poults are going to be on the ground in mid-June, late June? I'm going to have poults. So what can I do to hide them? What can I put in that's going to grow fast enough and big enough and enough time to be able to hide poults? Yeah,
so that's one you would want to develop over time. Probably if you wanted the quickest one, that Sudan grass, but it's a warm season grass, so it does have to wait till you get into the heat of the summer to really get it to develop. But like bird's foot trefoil, that's a perennial. If you're doing a clover, put some trefoil in there too. That gets nice and thick, and that gives them nice cover to burrow down into and hide. There's lots of different things you can do. Probably for turkeys, the perennial plots are the best. The cover. They do need food too, but they'll find that. But the cover is probably the biggest thing. Like you said, with all the predators and stuff, they need something to get in there and hide.
So I know I've read in some articles where guys actually plant strawberries for food plots. What's your take on any of that?
Yeah, like I said, you can plant regular garden vegetables and stuff out there for food plots too. They'll eat sweet corn. It's not so much what they'll eat, because they'll eat just about anything you put out there, but what can you put out there that's enough to sustain them through hunting season, or for if you're trying to do it for nutrition.
What's going to last long enough for them to keep coming back to it without something else eating it before they get a chance.
Yeah. I've heard of the strawberries because they say it's high in sugar. So, and deer
Yep, and so are the brassicas too. That's why they're quite popular too, because all the turnips and even the rape and stuff like that all have a lot of high sugar content in it.
So with brassicas, so obviously they're super easy to overseed with a brassica. So how much am I putting on per acre for brassica?
Brassicas, most of them are like 5 to 10 pounds, depending on again soil type and how thick of that, what you're doing for blend. I like to plant brassicas with oats or something like that too. Again, the variety in the soil. I think that's the best way to go. But each one has a little bit different rate if you're trying to get more turnips or more rape or whatever you're putting in there, rutabagas.
Can I go back in later? So let's say I planted clover in the spring. Can I go back in later and seed over the top of that with something else later in the summer? Or
yeah, it depends on what they do. So I mean, if they've browsed it right down to nothing, yeah, you can go back in there. If the clover is coming back and it's quite thick, it's going to be hard to get much to grow in there. Again, unless you go in there with a no-till, because you're past your freeze and thaw period, so you can't frost seed in that time. So you're going to probably have to no-till it in. Something to get that seed to soil contact to get it in.
Gotcha. Okay.
So a couple off the chart mixes here. So you were mentioning mixing your brassicas with oats. Is there certain food plot, recipes that you can make that just grow faster or that feed off of each other to make themselves stronger?
Well, there's certain varieties of seed that grow faster than others. Some of the, if you're trying to get a quick plot, some of the annual clovers will grow faster than a perennial clover. So, again, like crimson or berseem or something like that will grow a little faster than your regular perennial clovers. So if you wanted to do a mixture of those, you'll lose your annuals over the winter, but your perennials will take in over the next spring. But yeah, just like I said, diversity. You plant in your brassicas and you put some oats in there with it too. If they're going through there and eating the tops. For one, they protect each other a little bit. Hopefully they'll be eating more of the oats that are sprouting up through there, not eating the tops of your brassicas, and letting those develop a little bit. Or even if you're planting it with clover, hopefully they're eating the oats off and not pulling out those little tender clover sprouts that are coming. So
we kind of touched on deer. We've touched on a little bit about turkeys. So let's kind of go another direction. I mean, not a lot of people do this, but people do. Let's talk waterfowl. So I know millet is a big one for waterfowl guys.
Yeah. So I don't, not as diverse in that, but again, they like a lot of grain and stuff. So if you plant something that's got a lot of grain, and then even if you mow down or give yourself an area that you're going to hunt over, it works real well. You can use corn, soybean, again, sorghum works real good. Grain sorghum works good for them. But again, I think they're looking more for food than they are for cover and stuff in there.
Yep.
So I would stick more with the grains and stuff for food related than I would.
Gotcha.
It also depends on what time of day they're flying into where you have your water source. Are they flying in midday, or is that where they're sleeping?
I mean, obviously, so if you guys planting a spot like, I know places that get a lot of water. They get flooded out a lot of the time. Like, they hold water in the summer or whatever. Not it'll dry, but as soon as it rains, it's back to being wet. So a lot of guys won't plant those areas. Generally speaking, for deer, a lot of the time they just don't plant it because in the fall it holds water still. It hits October or whatever, and it's still holding water. But I've known guys that'll throw millet in those places, or let's say some kind of a duckweed or a wild rice of some kind, or a rice of some kind, to be able to pull ducks into those sections, and they do fairly well. From what I have seen. I know millet is a number one for guys that are running for ducks a lot.
Yeah, I think the state has some game areas that they actually dam up, and then they plant corn, millet, and stuff like that, and then they flood it, and then they open the dams in the fall and flood it so that they can come in and land on it. And
giant food plot.
Yeah,
it really is. It's a giant. They're giant food plots. Yeah, huge, like 1,200, 1,500 acre sections of just food plots.
Yeah.
So when we talk about that, you touched on this, like kill plot versus just like a plot that's for feeding deer. So what are you looking at?
Plot,
if you're going into, if you're got your spot, this is your food plot that you're feeding deer. And what are you looking for that versus this is my kill plot, this is what I'm going in, I'm looking to kill a deer?
Yeah, you have to look see how many deer you have on your property. I mean, if you're in an area where you have a lot of deer, it's going to take a pretty good sized food plot, to sustain their, their grocery needs, so, anything smaller than what will, benefit them nutritionally, I consider a kill plot. And I mean, kill plots go all the way down to, just a few feet by few feet. The problem is when you have those is the deer demolish them so fast. So some hunters will actually put a fence around it, maybe a couple strands of like a poly electric fence or something, put a solar fence around it. Try to keep the deer out of there up until, a few days before season starts, and then they take the fence down and then let them into this lush
So you just
green.
let them know that it's there, make them keep wanting it, and then
Yeah.
when you're ready to kill one, you open it up so they actually
Yeah, because
they get in
otherwise, if you got a lot of deer in a small plot, it's hard to get them to grow. Another thing I like to do is put a little cage, just a couple feet by a couple feet square of chicken wire out in your plot, just to keep an area where they can't get into, to see how your plot would really produce. Because we have some people that come in there, oh, my plot never grows. Well, I think it's growing. I think the deer are eating it faster than it's growing.
And you
So
just don't get out there in time to see it grow.
yeah, so they put this little cage out there, to see, and inside that cage, they're getting tall brassicas, tall clovers in it, and everything else around it is just a couple inches tall. It's because they got so much browse pressure that they don't really know what they got, that they're eating it that fast.
So going into browse pressure, and so what would be ideal for for an area? What's ideal for deer to acreage? What would be ideal for me in that situation? What should I look for?
Yeah, that's more of a biologist question. I don't know what they say. It really depends on, so if you're just relying on your food plots, it's not, it takes quite a, what you're growing there. In ag areas where you have a lot of food, that, obviously can sustain a lot more deer than like up in the UP where there's not a lot of food, that's why there's not a lot of deer up there. They got a lot of predation up there. They don't have a lot of food, so the deer up in the UP struggle.
Having a hard time.
Yeah. I mean, even down here in more central Michigan, over here in Montcalm County, it's not quite as much ag as, say, it is in southern Michigan, where they grow a little bit more corn and soybeans down there. They have a little bit higher deer population per acre than what we do. The exact numbers, I'm not sure. But I'm sure the DNR probably has some made-up number that they have, but
Right. Yeah.
but I'm not quite sure what that is.
Okay.
And we can take a step back from the food plots for a second. We can talk a little more about you. What's your favorite wild game in general? What's your favorite to hunt? What's your favorite to cook? Tell us a little bit about that.
Probably elk, just because they're cool animals, but they're very vocal. It's kind of like the combination of hunting turkeys and hunting deer, because they're vocal like turkeys, but they're a big game like deer are. So
I've always wanted to hunt caribou, but they're just practically the same to hunt as a whitetail. They're not as vocal as an elk like you'd think. They're about the same size-ish. They got the cool racks, and they're so much bigger than a whitetail here in Michigan. But when it comes to hunting them, they're just not as vocal as a turkey or an elk.
They're a little more herd too. They just stay
A
in
lot of
tight-
wide open country.
Yeah.
So elk. Are you a bow guy or a gun guy?
I'm a bow guy, except when it comes to elk.
Okay.
They live in some tough country, and you got to get up on them pretty close to get them with a bow. So I've gotten one elk, and it was with a gun, and I've always wanted to go out there and try it with a bow, but in knowing how hard it is with a gun,
How far was that open you shot him?
oh, he was, straight line of sight, maybe only a couple hundred yards. But to get to him, you had to walk way down in the ravine and back up. It was probably a half-mile walk to get down and back up to where he was, because he was straight across from where I was.
So just about every elk story. He was right there, but in all reality, he was a couple miles away.
Yeah, it's amazing the country that they live in out there. And I mean, that's another cool part about the elk too, is it's, the country that they live in. So.
It's beautiful out
Right,
west.
just
It
the
is.
trip alone is going to be worth it.
Yeah.
Definitely probably want to be very physically fit and ready to go on something like that for sure.
Yeah, especially if you're doing it with the bow. You want to be in very good shape. Yeah, we backpacked both of them, and once you get one down, then the real work begins.
How deep in were you when you got them down?
Yeah, it was snowing. It wasn't. I think it was the early part of November when I got mine. We got them down, and it was probably knee-deep snow, but it's knee-deep, and it's just like powder snow. I mean, as you're walking through it, I mean, there's no moisture to it. It's just super dry snow. But it's still, I mean, trying to carry, a couple hundred pounds of elk quarter on your back down this steep ravine with knee-deep snow.
That you just climbed through to get to him.
With altitude that there's, where you're up, 10,000 feet, and there's no air up there, so...
Right, yeah. I mean, stuff that here we don't even have anything close to.
You
think no, I had to walk 2 miles into my woods to get to my best hunting spot. Oh, no.
It's one of those things you keep saying, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And then after you get done and the pain goes away, you're like, yeah, that was pretty cool. I did that.
I want to go do that again.
Yeah, I want to do that again. So
yeah. I think from experience of hunting, I've hunted in Appalachia. I've hunted turkeys in Appalachia. And I've hunted, obviously, a little bit out west in Nebraska, but... Still, altitude is nothing like what happens out there. Colorado, Wyoming, western Montana and stuff. Like, I don't know anything of that kind of altitude or anything with the air getting that thin. Yeah. I can't even imagine trying to pack an elk out.
Yeah, it just sneaks up on you.
So, future hunting plans. What do you got planned for the future for you?
We were going to try to do an Colorado elk hunt this year, but it doesn't look like it's going to quite work out between the guide that we were going to work with and our schedule, so probably this year just going to focus again on the old Michigan whitetail.
Yeah?
Yeah, try to get out there a little bit more with my bow, practice a little bit more with my bow.
I've seen you pretty rusty before.
Yeah. So I need to probably start a little bit earlier this summer shooting that. And
so what kind of bow are you running?
I got a Matthews. I just got a newer one.
Oh, man.
The V3X, I got it a couple years ago.
Okay, I'm still shooting the old Halon.
Yeah, and I had a Monster before that, and I like the Monster, I think, better. But
really?
Just because I'm used to it. This one's smoother, nicer, no vibration and everything, but you get used to something. I shot that for so many years. I just had trouble switching, but...
You just got to break it in.
I got to get out there more this summer and start shooting it. And
obviously, personal preference, but what broadheads are you running?
Between the expandable and fixed, I am doing the expandable. I think I have right now. I think I have Rages. This year, I'm really wanting to switch to the what's the company here in Michigan that either the
G5.
Yeah, the G5.
The Montex.
Yeah, the G5 Montec and the. Help me out here, James. What's that other one that's...
You got me here.
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on
so
that.
I've been shooting a American-made broadhead called Tooth of the Arrow, and it's a 4-blade broadhead.
Fixed blade?
Yep. And I've loved that broadhead. I've shot it for 3 years now, and I've taken whitetails with it. I've taken a black bear with it. Really do like them broadheads a lot. For a fixed blade, and when it goes in, I mean, it creates a square hole because the center ferrule of that broadhead, it's all one piece, but when it goes through, it's got your blades cutting off it, but the center is like a square, and I mean, it just cuts a big old square like a bullet hole, and they just bleed. It's I've learned to really like that broadhead a lot, and I shot the expandables for years. I actually shot Rage for a long time. I actually never lost a deer with Rage. I hear a lot of guys talk about horror stories and stuff with Rage, but personally, my own personal experience is I've never had a deer. I've never lost one with them.
Yeah, I haven't had any bad, but I mean, you got more moving parts, and when you have more moving parts, you have more
things to go wrong.
To fail. So I mean,
you go to the deer and it just doesn't open, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen Rage broadheads not open one time, and it was actually my grandfather. He actually didn't have any O-ring rubber, the little rubber back before they had the new collar that they have, or now the no collars, but they had just the O-rings at the time. And my grandfather took a dab of super glue and he dabbed on back of both of the blades to keep the blades in place, and he actually shot a deer with them, and they didn't open. And he still killed the deer. Like he still found the deer, and I think it only went like 85 yards. Yeah. But
I hit a doe once, and it had been kind of sleeting, raining, and I think they got some
icing them, and they didn't deploy. Shot a doe once, and I still got her, and she didn't run real far. But it's another one of those things where it makes you think, man, if that had been my trophy buck and that thing didn't deploy, they're a lot tougher. Would this have killed them?
Some deer. I mean, I've seen deer get shot and hit one lung and go 75, 100 yards and die.
Yeah.
And I've also tracked deer that were hitting one lung that went a long ways. And I think there's still some of those one lung deer that are still running. And for penetration wise, I think the fixed blade, I get way better penetration for the most part than I ever did with a mechanical.
Yeah.
But obviously, you get a bigger hole with a mechanical for the most part, but you're not. The penetration in I think I only had ever had one actual pass through with a Rage, versus with my fixed blades that I shoot now, I don't have any issue. Every time I've shot a deer has been a pass through.
Sure.
Even my bear was clean through. I mean, just shooting through a wet paper sack.
Yep. Yeah, and having maybe the cut isn't quite as big, but having two entrance and an exit wound.
Yeah.
For one that gets a lot more blood out of there, and easy to track. So I mean, there's a lot of benefit to a fixed blade too.
Yeah, and obviously your exit wounds. If you're sitting in a tree, it's coming out lower than in your entry a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going in. If you go in high, you're coming out mid body, or you're coming out. If you go in mid body, you're coming out low, and a lot of the time that that's the blood's gravity takes effect. It's dropping out down through that lower hole. And whereas I think, from my experience with Rage, I mean, obviously the entry hole still got blood. You're still getting blood coming out of it, but I think the bulk of the blood would come out of the mouth of the deer than the entry wound that I created.
Yeah, a lot of those high wounds like that don't have an exit wound on the bottom, it takes a long time for them to start bleeding to where you can really track them.
Yeah, and I think that doesn't help either. With you see, younger hunters, they shoot a deer. I'm sure I hit it great, but I'm only finding small bits of blood, and you get an experienced tracker that goes in there and he goes 100 yards, and next thing you know, the deer starts dumping.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, well, you did hit it good, you just didn't go far enough because of where you hit it. Young hunters, I think, definitely they fall for the the mechanical side of things a lot more.
Sure.
And as a crutch, sometimes I think a lot of guys will use it as a crutch to say, I got this big old mechanical broadhead, I can make a subpar shot and not have to worry quite so much. And it might be true at times, but if your arrow setup's not right and you're not very knowledgeable on shooting deer, regardless if I hit a deer with a fixed or a mechanical broadhead, if it's bad, that deer should be left. I should be letting it lay.
Yep.
Right. I mean, you can have the best broadhead in the world and have the worst arrow, and it's not going to do anything.
Well, I mean, that's all in weight. And,
you got to have the correct setup to do what you need to do to.
It's all
get the animal quickly.
in FOCs and everything. You should. What poundage of bow am I running out of my bow? What's my draw? The weight of the arrow, the broadhead that I'm putting in, the insert even. I mean, weighted inserts nowadays.
Yep.
Everything that goes into shooting a bow and shooting a deer, it doesn't just. My quality of arrow can be subpar, but as long as it's heavy, a lot of the time I'm still going to drive it right through the deer.
Yeah. I think they're focusing a lot more on that now. That used to be just speed. I wanted the lightest, the fastest thing. I just, the flattest shooting. But now they're realizing, with a little more weight, in the FOC.
That gives you more room for error too.
Room for error, better penetration. You're going to have a lot more dead animals than.
Absolutely.
With a speed bow.
I agree with that. What was the old slogan for PSE? Speed kills, right?
Yeah,
for years it was what it was speed kills, right?
Yeah.
So and they don't hear that anymore, and I think it goes with what you said. Guys are knowing now that it's not the speed a lot of the time that kills. A lot of the time it's my setup as a whole. It's not just what my bow's kicking out for feet per second.
Yeah.
Yeah. To open up some old wounds, let's open up a story here. You ever missed a deer or hit one and never found it?
Oh, Lord.
What was it?
James,
I know it's
James,
a little soon, but
James, we don't talk about that
I
stuff.
think we should talk about.
No, yeah, I mean everybody's done it. Well, if you haven't done it, you're gonna do it probably if you hunt long enough.
You haven't hunted long enough. Yeah, you haven't.
Yeah, I've hit a couple deer. Yeah, where we haven't. The one I hit this year. I mean, I thought it was. I mean, when I let it go, and even when it hit, I thought it was a good shot, but it hit right dead shoulder.
Scapula.
Yeah, heard that pop and just never found a speck of blood.
Well, it gets you too. Is a lot of time when you hit them like that, they almost look like they go down. They're going down right when you hit them. All that kinetic energy dumping into them, and you're like, oh man, it was. It looked good. The deer was struggling getting up out of wherever I shot it.
He ran off like favoring that leg. I thought it was a good hit, and then just never did find any blood or anything.
Ugh.
So I'm sure he's still running around.
I had a buck that I've been watching on public land for a while. Me and a buddy actually were sitting on two different pinch points. We knew the buck had frequented both of them, and he was a big buck. For public land, he was a beast. He was probably a 150-inch deer. Like, he was a massive deer. And he come in following a doe to my buddy. My buddy had actually dropped his release early in the morning down, and we were hunting, in climbers and stuff. So he had actually dropped it as he was getting up, and then he couldn't find it. So he just tried to shoot him fingers, and he missed the deer. Deer goes back across the pinch point, comes back across all the way around and comes up mine, and my little pinch point that I'm sitting on comes right back up mine, trying to get back to the doe that had gone. Same buck comes right up the spot, the point, comes into a runway where I had him 35 yards range, drew back, settled the pin, everything was perfect. Buck literally stops naturally right in my hole, and I just touched it off, and I watched this blue light just sailing, and I mean, it's perfect, and probably 4 foot from the deer, I watched that arrow just smack and just go straight into the ground. The buck didn't even move, and there was a small twig there that just blended with him, and and that it wasn't super early in the morning, but it was a cloudy day, and I couldn't see the branch up against the deer. So I mean, those small things that just look back at it and go, like deer missed, opportunity lost.
Yeah, but you sleep a lot better when you know that it is clean mist. And
amen.
Yeah. He's still out there somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's important to note too that this year actually I shot a deer this year that I killed her with a gun, and she actually had her broadhead stuck in her spine.
Oh.
And she had not died, and I don't know how she didn't get paralyzed because it was in her spine.
Yeah, they are tough and resilient for sure.
Yeah, it's wild what they can survive through. So you never know that buck that you shot, he might still be ticking somewhere.
Yep.
Missing a leg or something.
Yeah, maybe missing a leg now. Who knows?
All right. Well, last question I'm going to ask you. For someone who's just starting a food plot, what's the most important advice you think you could give them? Just getting into it.
Soil sample. Soil sample. Yeah. Find out what you got and then go from there. I mean, even if you don't want to spend, I think you can do them online for like $25 or something, $30 or something like that with postage. But if you don't want to spend that, you can come. We sell little kits, that'll give you a rough idea of your pH and your phosphorus and your nitrogen. So, just have an idea. pH is probably the number one thing. So if you skimp on the other stuff, figure out what your pH is. Because if your pH is off, if your soil's too acidic, you can put all the fertilizer you want out there, but the plants just can't utilize it until you get that pH right. So figure out the pH and then go from there. And then after that, get on Google Maps or whatever and look at your food plot, from an aerial view, and to design your plot, like I said, figure out what can you offer them that the neighbor doesn't have. I think that's pretty important.
Find where they're coming in and out of, find, how many are there, find what the neighbors have.
Yeah, where they're coming from, where you think they come from. Again, with the bedding and the feed, you know what you want to plant. Maybe do the strip thing, where they're going to feel comfortable. That's the other thing, make them feel comfortable out in your plot so that they'll come out during the daylight. Otherwise, you're going to get all these nice photos at night of the buck eating your plot, but you're never going to see them. So
you try and utilize having bedding and food, make it real comfortable for them. If you've got the means to it, then
make them feel comfortable, because they don't like to be seen from houses and cars and stuff like that.
Unless they live in the cities or the towns, then they'll walk right by you in front of your house.
Then they'll come sit in your backyard.
Come up onto your porch.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's about it.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show with us.
No problem.
Yeah, it's good having you. Good content, and we appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah, no problem.
But that's going to do it for us here at Faith Fish and Feathers. We hope you all have a really good day. If you're ever in Edmore, go ahead and stop by the old mill, Randall's old mill. And he'll be happy to talk food plots with you here, and he's got a good selection of seeds, and he also got a really impressive amount of beekeeping stuff, actually, for anywhere around here. It's an impressive collection.
Will help your food plot too.
But all right, so we'll go ahead and close this in prayer, and then get on out of here.
All right.
Heavenly Father, we come to you today, Lord. We thank you for this day. We thank you for the knowledge that we get to learn from today, Lord, and the wisdom that we were able to receive today. And we thank you for everything that you do for us and keeping us safe, Lord God. We thank you for the animals that we pursue and the ability to be able to make food for them, Lord. We thank you for you giving them to us so to provide food for us, Lord. And we appreciate everything that you do for us every single day. In your name, Lord, amen.
Amen. All right, we will see you guys next week.
Got him. Limit. That's it.